I am Matt Levy. I am the frontman for the band Unfamiliar Things. We are an alternative band that's been kind of described as indie pop, but we've got a lot of very downplayed acoustic stuff as well, as you've heard throughout the album. Speaking of the album, self-titled debut LP Unfamiliar Things coming out March 15th, so very soon. Very excited about that. In terms of the band, it's me. We have studio players. They're hired guns. So in terms of the actual band, it started with me and my brother, and he still is helps me with songwriting and stuff, but I'm the principal songwriter. I put all the songs together, make sure it all happens, and that's that. The Decemberists released an album called The King is Dead, and I mean, I love all of their albums, but there's something that really stuck with me about that one, and the sound of it. How you can have an Americana sound that's not pigeonholed into that Americana genre, and talk about things that are not necessarily all country and whatnot. Because obviously, I grew up in LA. I mean, I don't have much to say on dirt roads. I'm very glad you asked that. So I think somebody recently called me a brutally honest narrator, and I think that's a good, definitely a good thing to say. So I guess my writing style and my quote perspectives, I find them different because I very rarely write from my perspective, and it seems like I have strong takes on certain things. But if you look a little deeper into like my life as a person, most of them are not about me. So just as like an example, the opening track, "Strangest of Art," I don't break people's hearts, and I'm not so dark and tortured inside. In fact, I married my high school sweetheart. I definitely I don't go around claiming that I'm some heartbreaker. But a friend of mine had a bad Hinge date, and I could sit there and write like a pop song about, and maybe even mentioning Hinge, and like, oh, today's world is so different. Or I can recede back into the fact that this Hinge thing, it's not so different than it's always been. um, so I took myself out of it completely. I put myself into the perspective of not my friend, but the person who did this. I've never met him, don't know who he is, but I was like, what does this person think about while they go about their day? So I wrote this very tongue in cheek song about what the inside of that person's mind might look like. And that's kind of how I approach everything. Again, alternate worlds. This is, I get a lot of people saying, it's a heartbreak song or something that happened to me. It's just, I was at a whiskey bar down the street from my house called Foreman's. I love it there. Um, and I was witnessing something in front of me that had nothing to do with me. And before I left the bar, I wrote alternate worlds about the person it was happening to. So it's the perspective question is funny, and I'm really glad you asked it, because I very rarely get to explain to people these are not my experiences. At least a lot of them are not my experiences. um, my life is not that tragic. I think for a long time, when I was in school, I was not a good student. In fact, I dropped out of high school. I never was reading books. I was never that kind of person. I was always running around doing God knows what. In my early 20s, I decided that I was going to read books. And I think at first, I take a lot of my musical cues from, like I said, people like the Decemberists, but also like Hosier, who's very literature oriented. And I originally started reading with the intent of finding things that I could reference in my songs, and I found that that was a really bad way to do it, because I was forcing literary references where they didn't belong, and trying to kind of write these songs that meant something different. So I stripped that completely, and I just started reading for the hell of it, poetry, Burns, Yeats, all sorts of things. And that's when I started reading just for the pure joy of it. That's when I started finding these references for every, thing that I could possibly think about. Melodies generally come to me quicker than lyrics. So it was always the case when I was working with my brother a lot that I was writing melodies and temporary lyrics that fit syllables and whatnot, and then I would explain to him what I thought that this song should kind of be about and where it should go. And he, in stark contrast to me, grew up very studious. I mean, he was like he's an extremely smart person. He went to Duke and he's got scholarships and blah blah blah. So I always kind of deferred to him and I said, this is kind of what I want. This is how it goes. Can you fit things into here? Now, like I said, as of late, I've been writing a lot of the stuff myself, and he still is very instrumental in this, but it's definitely more my project at the moment. So I got to step into this lyric writing role that I think I've always been self conscious about, which is why I put it onto him. I've always been like, oh, it's not good enough, so I'm gonna have my brother write it because if he writes it, then it's great. I can totally overlook any imperfections if somebody else did it. So I got to kind of explore it myself and just be okay with what it is and what I'm saying. So that's basically how it used to work, and now kind of how it works is it was kind of a ping pong back and forth, and now I've been able to take what our sound is and turn it into something that I can do a lot myself, and that's been fun for me. Yes. Yes, I am. And I think that's also an interesting. Wow, you have really good questions today. That is an interesting question because I think it's something that is lost on music these days a little bit. We're living in this world that's very single oriented. It's a playlist placement. You're discovering things on a playlist. Oh yeah, I like that artist because I heard that one song. It's rare these days that you go and you put on an album front to back and you think about how it flows. But I wanted that to be something, not necessarily because I think my fans are going to be discovering me by listening to my album front to back, because that's usually not how it happens. But I wanted people to discover on, social media or playlists or wherever they do. I want them to be able to go back and appreciate things like that. I mentioned Hosier. I obviously discovered Hosier not by listening to his albums front to back. Now I do, and I'm glad that there was another level that I could appreciate instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, I know this one too. I know this one too." It flows, like you said. In terms of thinking about it, yes, it's more sonic for me than it is the meat of the song, the lyrics, and what it means. For me, it's more of a sonic journey. You'll notice that it goes up and down because I didn't want it to taper down and down and down, like I see a lot of albums do, and get less and less plays as the songs get more calm. But yeah, like I said, I just kind of wanted it to be a cool roller coaster that you could go on. It's Sonic for me, except for the fact that I wanted to put Old Haunts after Strangest of Art, and I didn't want to say Haunts two songs in a row because it's Haunted House and Old Haunts, and I was like, I listened to it over and over again, and I was like, I can't do that. It's gonna be like people are gonna think I'm like some weird Halloween. I mean, I like Halloween, but you're like, this is weird, so I shifted that, and I actually changed the order after I got it back from our mastering engineer, Gene Grimaldi, who's done. I mean, he's done like Fletcher and Sting and Lady Gaga. And I really wanted to master this thing myself because I'm very proud about all of that type of thing. But when I was in my last studio session, I just decided I can't do this. I got to have somebody else. I've worked in music for 10 years. Since I was 15, I work on television shows mainly. I produce live music for TV shows. So I record and mix and produce like The Voice, American Idol, and Dancing with the Stars are mainly the ones. So there was an element of that I was able to bring in where, yeah, it's my music for the first time and it's a debut album, but it's not my first rodeo. I've done this with other people before. So it was kind of refreshing to be able to use those things that I've learned and make it, instead of being paid hourly or something to make somebody else sound good, it was kind of cool to step into the role of it's for me finally. So it's interesting. I just going back to the process for how that's kind of created is um, it generally goes to I pick a tempo and I go back into my little room back there and I play it on the guitar first. Then I'll sing vocals. So this all is usually guitar and vocals. I will then start adding little elements. And if there's anything that I feel like I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play this piano and the guitar and I play drums and everything. So I can lay these ideas down and usually I can get it pretty good. And if it passes for me, I'm like, great, I'll keep it. And obviously that dynamic is not hard to find when it's yourself because I know exactly what I just did and I know how I'm going to play off of that. If there's anything that I feel could have been done better, even after me doing it a couple times, that's when I go in and I use the same musicians that I've been using for years on other projects that know me, they know what I like. So that's when I call them in and I go, this is what I have, and I want it like this, but I want it done better. This is the piano run. Can you do it though without the quantization and me, messing it up a little bit? Uh, so that's kind of how that works. Is that idea already comes from me? It's rare that somebody in my studio is playing something I've never heard, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. It does happen. It's happened a couple times on this record, but most of the time it's something that was thought out or played first by me, and not to say it was all me, 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 me. I'm just realistically answering your question as to how that trust is built. It's easy to trust yourself, I guess, in terms of what's going to sound good. It definitely helps. It's a blessing and a curse because I think sometimes I have these fantastical ideas of, oh, we're gonna put a sweeping B3 here, and this, and it gets so big in my head that it could never be what I think it's going to be. And I'll get into the studio and I'll have the professional players and I'll have me directing everything, and then it's just not it. And I think that bothers me more than if I were an acoustic artist that was just guitar and vocals. And then, yeah, any drums you put on this are going to be awesome because I've never heard that. Like, that's so rad. And for me, I build it so much up in my head that it's really hard to meet that expectation that I have. So, yeah, I guess there's that. But it is helpful because I don't have to sing my parts at other people. Like, I don't have to go into the studio and go like, "Well, I was thinking it's a ba 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 ba." Like, I can actually do it on the piano and then say, "But better," or I'll just play it, whatever. Luckily for me, the studio musicians I use are not like bridge trolls. Like, they're very I don't know, sometimes you get these like 60-year-old, 70-year-old guys that are just kind of like they live in the studio, and luckily I'm using some folks that are younger, and they kind of have the same style as me and they play the same type of music as me, and they they're marketable, let's just say that. And so I'm excited to, if we book a tour, they're more than happy to come with me. So we've got that figured out. I don't have to go, posting up posters looking for a guitarist. Like, I've got my people and we're ready to go. It's just and I would like to go with a band. I always say that if it were like a smaller opportunity that I had to go with just my guitar, I totally could. um, but I think it's so much more fun with a band. I love that big sound. I'm gonna choose two that I've already spoken about. So I would have the Decemberists open for Hosier. Now, in that one, oh man, see, you said dead or alive. See, it would be so cool. I'm just gonna say it. I mean, look, I'm not a huge Beatles fan as far as I'm just not a huge Beatles fan. I love their songwriting. I never turn them on because it just doesn't do it for me. However, I would really love to see them live because I have heard that there's nothing like seeing, them live, the four members, like the original four, and just vibing together. So I want to experience that. So I would say Hosier, Decemberist, Beatles.